In this video, I am going to discuss about continuous casting process and skews casting process. So continuous casting process. So continuous casting process is basically a permanent mold casting process, which is also known as strength casting process. The main application of continuous casting process is producing a billet that may be square cross section, which is used for producing TMT bar using rolling process. In continuous casting process, a semi-finished square billet is producing that will be later rolled to produce finished TMT bar in rolling mills. See, this is the figure of continuous casting process. In the case of continuous casting process, the liquid metal is preparing separately in a furnace, and that is carried to casting area by using a ladle. So this is a ladle. Ladle is a bucket shaped structure which is used to carry molten material to nearby casting area from furnace. From ladle, molten material is flow into tin dish. Tin dish which receive the molten material from ladle. From tin dish, the molten material is slowly and steadily flowing to the continuous casting mold. So this is a continuous casting mold. Commonly a square section mold is used for producing a square billet, semi-finished billet. So when the molten material that will be flowing through the mold, it will fall through the mold, and at the same time it will get solidified gradually. So this is the molten material, and when the molten material is flowing through the mold, it gets solidified and it will be converted into a semi-finished form. So this is molten material and this is solidified square billet. So when the molten material is flowing through the mold, there will be rollers are provided in the either side. Molten material that gets solidified and the rollers will be rotating, and the semi-finished billet that will be moved to downward direction. So here cooling is provided in both sides for cooling the billet, and later after solidification the billet will be cut in particular length using gas torches. So this is known as continuous casting process. The main application of continuous casting process is producing a square billet that is later used for producing TMT bar using rolling process. So in continuous casting process, the casting that will be produced continuously from the mold, and the required length is cut after solidification. Okay. So what is the advantage of continuous casting process? Continuous casting allows manufacturing metal slabs or bar in large amount by short time. That's a very important point. Continuous casting process are commonly used for producing slab or bar in large amount in short time. Sprue, runner, riser not used. There's no waste material. This leads to 100% casting yield. See, in continuous casting process, there is no sprue, runner, riser, and it will always produce 100% yield casting. Mechanical properties are high and extremely reproducible. Increased use of purchased scrap. So purchased scrap means for continuous casting process, commonly reusable scrap are used. Scrap material will be using, and it will be melted in an electric arc furnace. Product has good reliable and soundness. Okay, so these are the advantage of continuous casting process, which is used for producing slab or bar in large amount by short time. Sprue, runner, riser not used. There's no waste of material. This leads to 100% casting yield. Mechanical properties are high and extremely reproducible. Increased use of purchased scrap. Product has good reliable soundness. Okay. Then what are the disadvantages? Continuous and capable cooling of mold is required, otherwise centerline shrinkage will develop. A continuous cooling will be required in the case of continuous casting process, otherwise defect like centerline shrinkage will be developed. Simple cast can cast which should have a stable cross section. Large capital investment is needed. Not proper for small amount of production. Required large ground space. So these are the disadvantages of continuous casting process. So this is about continuous casting process. The main application of continuous casting process is producing a square billet that is later used for producing TMT bar using rolling process. Okay. So next one is Q's casting process. Q's casting process, it is also known as liquid metal forging process. It has the advantage of casting and forging process. See, Q's casting process are commonly used for producing non-ferrous casting having mechanical properties capable with the casting. See, the main application of Q's casting process is which is used for producing non-ferrous casting. See, this is a figure of Q's casting process. We have a die, upper die and lower die. The liquid metal is poured into the lower die, then upper die moving in downward direction and forces the liquid metal that will move upward the gap between the lower die and upper die. Okay. See, after the liquid metal has been metered into the open half of lower die, see, a certain amount of liquid metal that is pouring into the lower die. A closely fitting upper die moves down and compresses the liquid at a high pressure. See, then the upper die will moving in downward direction and compress the liquid metal with a high pressure. And this pressure is maintained during solidification also. Due to this pressure, the liquid metal that will move in upward direction, the gap between the punch and die. Complex shape component can be produced by this process. This process combines the advantage of casting and forging. So this is known as Q's casting process. So this is the final casting. See, what we mean by Q's casting is, it is also known as liquid metal forging process. It has the advantage of casting and forging process. See, in this Q's casting process, a certain amount of liquid metal is metered and that is poured into the lower half of the die. Q's casting process consists of a die which have a lower half and upper half. So after a certain amount of liquid metal that is poured into lower half of the die, the upper die, that means punch, that will move in downward direction and exert a pressure over the liquid metal. And that pressure will be remains there during solidification also. Due to this pressure, the liquid metal will flow in upward direction, the gap between the punch and die. And after the solidification, the upper die, that means punch, the punch will move in upward direction and the casting that will be ejected. Okay. See, what are the advantages of Q's casting processes? Offer a broader range of shapes and components than other manufacturing methods. Little or no machining required post casting process. No machining required after casting process. Low level of porosity. The defect porosity is very less. Fine microstructure with higher strength components. No waste of material. So these are the advantages of Q's casting process. Little or no machining required post casting process. It will offer broad range of shapes and components than other manufacturing method. Low level of porosity. Fine microstructure with higher strength components. No waste of metal. Disadvantage. Cost is high due to complex tooling. No flexibility as tooling is dedicated to specific components. Process need to be accurately controlled, which slows the cycle time down and increase process cost. So these are the disadvantages of skew casting process. Cost is high, as the tooling cost is high. The tool will be always dedicated to specific component. The process need to be accurately controlled, which slows the cycle time down and increase the process cost. Okay, so this is about the skew casting process. So in this video, I have discussed continuous casting process and skew casting process. So these are the different types of casting process as per syllabus. So we have discussed about, there are two basic classification of casting process: expandable mold casting process and skew casting process. In expandable mold casting process, we have discussed about sand casting process, shell mold casting process, precision investment casting process. And permanent mold casting process, we have discussed die casting process. In centrifugal casting process, true centrifugal casting process is a permanent mold casting process. Semi-centrifugal casting and centrifuge pressure casting is a expandable mold casting process. Then continuous casting process and skew casting process. So this is all about different classification of casting process. Okay, thank you.